For this tutorial, we will be working on using code. Specifically, we'll be working on using if statements, which are a control that we can use to tell code to do things only under certain conditions. So let's quickly wire up a circuit where we can connect an LED here to some power. We'll be using digital input number 8 there, and I'm going to run a wire to ground from the other side. So this is some default code that I'm going to get rid of. And so here I'm going to turn this LED on, which we know exactly how to do. We set pin 8 to high. And so if we start this, we have a circuit that runs from pin 8 to the positive side of the LED, through the negative side, through this 1K resistor, all the way to ground. So if I start this simulation, we get the LED lighting up. So now what I'd like to show is how to use an if statement to do this only under a certain condition. So here we've used this if block. So this if block allows us to execute the code in the middle only if this condition is true. So we can scroll over to our math table and pull some sort of inequality here. And we can say if 1 is less than 1, set pin 8 to high. Or if 1 is not equal to 1, set pin 8 to high. You can also use this built-in variable of high. So we can say if high is not equal to high, set pin 8 to high. Obviously, this should be false here. This inequality will evaluate high not equal to high. Well, we know high is equal to high, so this should not turn on the LED. So it looks like this is working. If we simply change this inequality, we get this statement now is true, and our code will turn this light bulb on. So this is looking good. What I'd like to do now is, using this functionality of Tinkercad, I can translate these blocks to text by switching to blocks to text. So, wow, what have we just introduced? All sorts of stuff going on here. The basics of the Arduino sketches, or a program, Arduino calls them sketches, are using C++ code to control our Arduino. This is pretty simple, but it takes some time to get used to. So let's keep our circuit in view. So what we're doing here is there's always going to be two functions, which we'll get into exactly what a function is later on, but there's always going to be two functions defined in each Arduino sketch. So here we have our void setup method, which is anything we need to do to get the Arduino configured, and our void loop method. And this is the body of what happens every single time that the Arduino runs. So what this means, loop, is this will run infinitely. So as soon as this loop finishes running, we'll come back to the top of it and run again. This is a concept that we'll get into a lot deeper when we start exploring for loops and while loops, but that's not quite yet. This time we want to see what this translation is. So again, this setup, all we do is make sure to set our pin mode 8 to output. This is something that if we wanted to use something as input, we would instead use input. Looks like I can't edit this because it's just directly translating the blocks. But if I were to change this to input, then we would instead be listening to signal on pin 8 instead of putting out signal. So then, in our loop method, our block statement gets translated from if high equals high to that exact same thing, just in code. We'll get into the syntax of this as we start exploring stage 3. And then our set pin 8 to high becomes this function, digital write 8 to high. And then this delay is built in to make the interface a little friendlier. That's something that doesn't have a direct comparison here. So if we change something from high over here to low, we'll see a corresponding change on the right. Same thing here. And we can change our pins and what we're setting our pins to. So this should be a nice little exposure to what an if statement is and how to translate that to code for when you begin working on your Arduino, on your Idea Bulb Stage 3 project.